Hello, in this lesson we are going to be tuning in with satisfaction. And so I just wanted to start with this fun quote that says, "If you don't love it, don't eat it, and if you love it, savor it." And so eating for satisfaction means regaining your pleasure in eating, and there are a few steps that can help us get to that point. The first is to ask yourself what you really want to eat, discovering the pleasure of the palate, making your eating experience more enjoyable, not settling, and checking in with yourself and asking, does it still taste good? And so when you ask yourself what you really want to eat, we want to be thinking about foods that truly pique our desires and those that we actually enjoy. And so taking the time out to figure out what you want is a critical first step, because that means that you can align your food choices with foods you actually like. This also means that you are giving yourself unconditional permission to eat, which is rebuilding that relationship up with food. The second step is to discover the pleasure of the palate, and this means identifying the tastes, textures, aromas, appearances, temperatures, volume, and filling capacity of foods that you like. This may be very individualized, and so you might want to trial a period of experimentation. And so you could have a look and try different kinds of foods, snacks, cuisines, and cooking styles to figure out what you actually enjoy eating. One of the things that I would ask myself in this process is whether you learnt something about your food preferences or palate that you didn't know before. Other questions to ask yourself when making food choices includes, what do I feel like eating? How will the food taste and feel in my mouth? Do I want something sweet, salty, savory, sour, or even slightly bitter? Do I want something crunchy, smooth, creamy, soft, lumpy, or fluid? Do I want something hot or cold or moderate? And how will my stomach feel when I am finished? The third step is to make your eating experience more enjoyable by savoring your food. And so by taking the time to appreciate your food, sitting at a table, taking several breaths before eating, or even eating in a relaxing and enjoyable atmosphere, this can all go towards you being able to savor the experience and savor your food. To eat when you're pleasantly hungry rather than over hungry. And so I think we have all experienced this, where we have been hangry or ravenous. The way that we approach food, our eating experience, and how much food that we eat, and even the pleasure that we take away from food is very different when we are ravenous and hungry versus when we are pleasantly hungry. And so how we avoid this from happening is to stop skipping meals, to check in with yourself before you start eating, and to even use the hunger and fullness scale to gauge where you are before you eat. Setting an inviting environment. By setting your table in a pleasant manner, so choosing cutlery, dishes, music, lighting, candles, visual cues around you, all of this can enhance the experience of eating for you. I have had clients who would enjoy their eating experience by using particular plates and spoons. I would just try and find something that works for you. I mean, restaurant industries put a lot of energy, money, and effort into creating that inviting atmosphere. And so you could also do a small scale version at home and just try and change a few things so that you actually enjoy that experience of eating. The two other critical things is to avoid tension while eating. We know that when you're experiencing stress, any arguments, or feeling that pressure or tension can take away from the eating experience. You may experience fluctuations in your appetite, and this may then impact how well you digest your food. The other critical thing is to provide variety. No one wants to be eating the same for most meals of the day. And so to avoid flavor fatigue, we want to provide a little bit of variety or some little bits of change in terms of the types of meals that you eat. The fourth is to not settle. And so this means that you are not obligated to finish eating a food if you do not like it. And so tasting and experiencing your food and assessing if you genuinely like it can give you an indication of whether or not you should finish that meal. I know this can be tricky for some clients who maybe are experiencing food insecurity or they have a limited budget for food, but there is no obligation to finish every mouthful of food on your plate or be forced to eat something that you genuinely don't like eating. The fifth step is to check in with yourself and ask, does this still taste good? And so as you eat, the level of pleasure decreases over time. We've all experienced this, where after starting your meal, midway through or 3/4 of the way, it doesn't seem as appealing as it did before. There can be two reasons for this. The first is habituation, where the more food that you have, satisfaction decreases. And the second is sensory specific satiety. This means that usually after 2 minutes of eating a food, our subjective liking for that food decreases. This was found through the research, and maybe you can try a little test to see if it is true for you. And so we want to just shift focus on process over perfection. We know that perfection doesn't exist, and we know that every eating situation is going to be a little bit different. And so not all situations will provide optimum conditions for satisfaction. So what we want to do is aim for good enough. To help this, we want to try and keep letting go of control and letting go of any diet or food rules. Ultimately, this just means making the best of what situation is presented to us. Okay, so this is another layer on building satisfaction and regaining that pleasure with eating, and that's mindful eating. You may have heard of this before, but I think it is a really important tool that we can use to enhance that experience. And so mindful eating is an approach to food that focuses on an individual's sensual awareness of food and their experience with food. And so this may provide opportunities to tune into your body. It builds trust and positive experiences with food. It allows you to feel more control over eating. It helps with better digestion, and it is a way to learn to cope with guilt or anxiety around food. How we put this into practice is to try and eat slowly, and to do that without distraction. We also want to distinguish between true hunger and non-hunger triggers for eating, and to listen to those physical hunger signals. By doing this, it is a way to assess your whole eating experience. So a few of the ways that we can actually put this into practice include guided meditations to connect us back to the present moment, and they are a really useful tool to putting mindful eating into practice. I will link some of the useful ones that I use in practice below in the description. But essentially what we want to do is engage all your senses when eating. We want to think about the colors, the smells, any sounds, textures, and flavors during our eating experience. So to bring this all together, we know that satisfaction comes from asking yourself what you really want to eat, discovering the pleasure of the palate, making your eating experience more enjoyable, not settling for meals that you don't enjoy, checking in with yourself and asking, does this still taste good? And practicing mindful eating. And so I want to end with this quote by Susan Albers, and it says, mindful eating is about awareness. When you eat mindfully, you slow down, pay attention to the food you're eating, and savor every bite. Thank you so much for listening to this lesson. I have activities that you can start putting into practice from this module's guidebook. And remember to please like, subscribe, or share this video with others who may find it helpful.